Are we okay to start?
Yes, we are.
Okay. I just want to let you know my name is Linda and I work with MUSAC. And currently today is our art event, and we're at the Resource Center in downtown Minneapolis. They're getting ready for the march that's going to take place in Minneapolis on the south side in Minnesota. So I'm sitting in a room, I'll just let you know, because we can have unexpected twists and turns in all of our journeys. And as advocates, that is just the way it goes. But I was sitting in the room with some sage lit and I set off the fire alarms for the whole building. So everybody is standing outside. Way to go. I interrupted the whole event.
That
But
sounds like something I would do. I feel for you.
I feel for me too. I don't even want to go back in. No, I'm just kidding. Of course, I want to go back in. We've been in there for hours. But I want to say thank you to each and every one of you that is sitting here in this big virtual circle, as well as everybody over there that's a part of this also. Unfortunately, the event we're hosting tomorrow, and we're coordinating and partnering up with lots of people in the Twin Cities Metro, is the worst case scenario for every person in every community and the families affected by murdered and missing Indigenous women and relatives. So with that in mind, I'm going to encourage you to get a hold of something for yourself, something that provides you comfort, whether it's medicines. Just don't light them where there's fire systems in place, or go outside. Or if it's however you find your peace and however the creator or the sacred energy, I ask that you find a way to do that, because these slides are so powerful, and the information that they bring to you, here comes the fire trucks, is so invaluable for the people you will be meeting face to face throughout your time doing advocacy, probably throughout the rest of your life, honestly. So with this and with medicine, now I'm echoing. I think it muted me. Am I echoing?
It's getting better wherever you're
Okay,
making
good.
frequency.
Multiple people unmuted is the reason that it's echoing. Okay. Well, I just want to say Wakantaka Tokashina Ate Ushi Ina Padame Atanka Gijimani Du Chimigwich. Thank you, grandfather. Thank you, grandmother. Thank you, the earth and the sky and all of the elements, the sacred trees. Thank you for every person sitting in this circle today. I ask that you help them to be open in their hearts and their minds and receive the information that is being given from somebody's hearts and minds. People sharing, every one of these people come with a excess amount of wisdom, kindness, caring, but mostly compassion and love for their people. I ask that you help us to hear, not just with our ears and our minds, but with our hearts, and be able to accept the information, share information if we have something to share with each other, as everybody brings their own wisdom that can help and empower other people to do their best work. We ask that you bring our ancestors forward to help us to be confident in our speaking, in our listening, in our everyday life. Advocacy is very, very hard work, but being a victim of sexual violence is really, really hard also. I ask grandfather, grandmother, that you help everybody in this circle, the presenters, the advocates, the people listening in, watch over our ASL interpreters. It's hard work doing what they do. I ask that you be a part of all of these modules and help us to do our best for our Christine, who's out, who's usually the push behind all of these trainings. We ask that you help us to do our best work in her honor and in her mother's honor. I ask these things for all of our relations. Thank you. The fire alarm's off.
Thank you so much, Linda. And hello, everybody. My name is Stephanie Bridwell, and I know I hear an echo too. I am with MUSAC, and I'm just very happy. I've been kind of communicating with everybody, and so I'm very happy to see you all on. There's 121 in here. How amazing is that?
Yes.
And we ask you guys to mute, please, so that we have respect for the trainers and then other people that are going to be speaking. And I just want to thank you all very much. And thank you, Linda, for opening. I love your words. You have this beautiful way of bringing me back to my spirit and kind of reminding me of why. And so today we are going to be going over 2 modules, and we will be taking a break in between just to give you a little input on kind of how that we do jump on every Tuesday and Thursday at 12:30. MUSAC staff will be, but we have that little, like you saw today, that little 30 minutes of just kind of us getting ready to go, getting grounded. Anybody that needs anything, and then we will begin at 1. And so I just kind of wanted to also thank Hercules. As you see, he's our ESL interpreter, and then Angela. We appreciate you guys very much. And there's a list of kind of who MUSAC is today that will be facilitating.
Hi, my name is Deb Bush, and I work with MUSAC. I work with Steph. I am the partner for the TSAS grant. I have been in the field for over 20 years, and I was a program manager for the TSAS grant, which was the sexual assault and domestic violence program. And I'm very honored to be in a space with everybody today. And I too love Linda's wonderful words.
Bonjour and good afternoon, good morning, everyone. My name is Jolene Engelking. I am so excited to be here with you all today. I am White Earth Anishinaabe from here in Minnesota. I have been with MUSAC, which I realize we keep saying, but for folks who don't know, it's the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition, which is both a statewide tribal coalition in Minnesota. And also what's bringing us here today is our national training and technical assistance work. I currently am the lead on our National Tribal Sexual Assault Resource Center. And I am just so happy to be with everyone today, because advocacy trainings are, to me, one of the most powerful tools that we have and ways of building connection in this movement. So thank you all.
Hello, everyone. My name is Becky Jordan. I am our communications and design specialist here at MUSAC. I currently live in South Dakota. My family is enrolled in Sistine-Waptanoyate in northeastern South Dakota. My background is also in advocacy in a variety of roles, and I just am thrilled to be able to be here with you all today and throughout the training. I think, these trainings are some of the most important, not only in some of the foundational work that we do, but just as we continue to be lifelong advocates, because we're always learning something new. And so I think these are one of the most fun spaces to be in this work, because we get to just be together and share and listen and learn from one another. So I am very grateful to be with you all, and just looking forward to the next month or so seeing you all. So good to be with you today.
Thank you. I think Linda is kind of being.
I'm okay. I'm back. The fire department evacuated. I'll just let you know.
So we get to call.
Somebody not muted. Sorry, I can't hear. I was gonna say that when I walked in the building, all these women are here doing their work, and there's lots of people flooding in and out, and people setting up. But it was the first young Native firefighter I've ever seen in the city that I saw come in here, and I was like, they're like, who is that? So maybe there was a reason that all set off. I don't know. But Wasaya Kwe Indigo, Makwa Induram. I am Linda Thompson. I am Anishinaabe from the Boys Fort Reservation. That's where my dad is from, up in northern Minnesota, almost to Canada. And then my mother's from Leech Lake, and my mom's grandma is from Mille Lacs. So I'm heavy in Minnesota. The other thing is I spent a lot of time with the Dakota people at the
Can I do the phone?
Spirit
No,
Lake.
I've never done them.
And can you see who's not muted? Thank you. So I just want to be mindful of that, because if somebody's talking and they're training, then it's really hard for other people to hear. I do want to say something else. I am a mom to 6 kids, and I've adopted a child also, and I have 4 women who call me mom. And so I want to say welcome. Who's got the PowerPoint? Steph? Awesome. Okay, everybody's calm here now. So thank you and welcome again.
Thank you very much, Linda. And I didn't get to like fully introduce myself. I am a member of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe. I'm Lakota. I'm also a single mother, advocate, survivor, and just very honored to be here with you all. And I'm sorry that my heart keeps jumping around. I'm trying to work with people trying to get into, so please forgive me for the screen distraction. Jolene, did you want to go over the 4 elements?
Yes, I do. Hello, everyone, again. Ooh, I just need a name. That there's something about, like, there's this beautiful energy that comes when we're all together. But there is also something that's a little bit, it's anxiety provoking to have 120 some of you all on this call and wanting to make sure that we are doing this right for you all. We have been doing this 40-hour training now for just about a decade. And I was part of the initial like pilot of it, when they were finally like, we wrote it, we're all excited to launch it. And I was part of that first pilot. And it's so beautiful to think about the literally, I think about 2,000 people that have been trained with this curriculum, and having to shift it from what was an in-person training to virtual, which allows us to reach so many more of you, also creates some of those little quirks. Like, for example, we want to have people being able to unmute and be able to connect with us easily. That's why we have it set up in a meeting format instead of a webinar, because we want to be able to hear from you on the regular without having to gatekeep all the time. But then it comes with that caveat of sometimes people come in and inadvertently aren't muted. And so we do want to kind of just acknowledge that we just want to be here with you all today. I am sipping my coffee and I'm having my medicine right next to me, and we're all just in this together. And so throughout, the next month or so, we just really invite folks to come into these spaces, with their full selves, whatever that means to you at this day and time. And to be best able to kind of connect with each other as we are learning, and to there's a level of vulnerability that comes with things, as well as a level of bravery that comes with speaking up in these spaces. And so kind of just wanted to start this by kind of grounding it in the fact that all of our work and all of our projects that we do, all of our interactions with communities, with survivors, are grounded in our, you know, our traditional values. And for each of us, that means something completely different. Not completely different, but as you're seeing, you know, we, even as a staff, we represent so many different tribes with so many different beliefs. And even seeing who's all on this call, we all have slightly different, you know, nuances and things that our tribes believe. But one of the things that we found is often, you know, core and integral to most tribes are these beliefs in the earth, and how deeply we are connected and how deeply our advocacy is connected to the earth. And so with that, we wanted to kind of start by talking about, you know, the 4 sacred elements, which are talking about the fire, about the water, the ground, and the air. Did I just somehow mess that up? I am so sorry, folks. And we wanted to kind of think about how at different points in our life, we all resonate with different of these elements, and how sometimes for me, it's the water that is what calls me. For other times, it's the fire that we have been drawn to, or that is speaking to us, or that is coming to us all the time through our work. And so we just kind of wanted to lay this out as that foundation as we think about things. And so also, Steph, when the breakout rooms are in a few slides, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so does anybody have anything else to add about the 4 elements?
I think just kind of recognizing again, I know it was stated already, but just keeping them near you to keep you grounded. And like for me, I have like sage right here that I'm balling up and I'm smelling, because even though we work in this field, we also still get activated. And I'm learning as I go to kind of I'm learning that about myself, to when I need to bring those elements closer. And so that's why we suggest this in the beginning. So we will keep reminding that throughout the training. But that's all I have on that. Thank you.
This is Jolene again. And yes, like, so, you know, right now I feel that many of us are surrounded by different things. Sometimes we may have the rocks that are surrounding us, all of those different medicines that are by us, as well as the water that is both hydrating me, but also giving me life in so many different ways. And so we ask you to keep what you can around you. And also, if you need to be taking breaks within these spaces, as your weather allows or as your space allows, you know, it's even okay for you to step outside and to do some grounding, to actually feel the earth under your feet within these spaces. So next slide. We also, within this, invite everybody to kind of, I don't know, shake off some of those things that we often bring with us into our work, right? There's many of us who we have been brought up in different work organizations or things like that, that have taught us some pretty unhealthy ways of doing our work, right? And so what we invite people today is to really kind of rethink and pause, thinking about how, when we're in these spaces together, how are we best able to do this work? And I'm sure that many folks on this call have heard about, you know, the characteristics of white supremacy culture, or white supremacy within the workplace. This is a framework that has been around for a few years, but it is something that we always kind of want to like lean back on, because sometimes like these habits that are listed on this page are what can cause some of the biggest issues, both within like ourselves as individuals within the work, and collectively when we're in spaces together. And so, for example, thinking that no matter what you say, it has to come out just right, or you shouldn't say it, right? This like strive for perfectionism at all times, right? And how sometimes when we're learning, especially within these spaces together, we may not be able to always word things just perfectly, but we're trying and we're learning together, right? How it is so easy to think that what we have, like what we think or what we believe is right, and that what other people
Yeah,
are
I'm
thinking,
gonna go off really fast and see if I can email her from my Outlook email.
that what other people are thinking is wrong. So there is one right way and one wrong way. And as we'll explore in a little bit, this work can get really messy, and that's because our lives are messy, right? And so another one is this idea of this sense of urgency, right? And so you'll see that we want to respect your time within this space, right? We want to really make sure that we are using the time that we have intentionally. And that is why, though, so for today, like you'll see on the different announcements that while we open the room at 12:30 Central, we will not actually get started until 1 o'clock. And so today we're really thankful that folks were able to be in a little bit early. But please know that if you don't have that time, or if you want to come in a little later, 1 o'clock is when we start, and we will not go any later than 4:30 Central. And we will still create space, though, for folks who want to or need to have time to debrief or ask those one-to-one sorts of questions. But because of that, and because of the way that we operate as an Indigenous organization, like we sometimes have to control that sense of urgency, right? Many of us are coming from advocacy backgrounds on staff, right? And on MUSAC staff, and it's always interesting because in advocacy, often you're having to react, right? You're having to be in crisis. And so in this space, we're inviting you to try to pull away from that. And we know that this work is urgent. This work that we do, I mean, there are, people in our communities, in our neighborhoods, in our lives who are being hurt right now. And there is this urgency that we need to do all that we can, right? And people need us to be doing it now. And if we're able to kind of take this time to really kind of think and reflect, maybe we can come up with new ways of doing things better or learning things that we wouldn't have thought. And so we ask you to kind of try to work against some of those, characteristics that we often have. And some of those you may not have any issue with, and other of those are going to be like, what is bothering you on that day-to-day sort of basis? And we also want to another one on here that I want to acknowledge is that right to comfort, is that this space is going to make some people uncomfortable. There will be some things that are talked about or that are explored, including us talking about the oppression that that has led to the violence and so many other things happening in our community. And so by allowing ourselves to be uncomfortable and to experience that discomfort is when we're best able to grow sometimes. And so we want to name that, well, we want people to always feel safe and able to share their mind, that there will be things that are said by us, by other people who may be participating, that will make you uncomfortable. And so, yeah, anything else on these before we move on?
This is Becky, Jolene. I just wanted to echo so much of what you're saying. And I think, this slide for me in particular is one of those that I even like to have like printed out or something that I can view when I'm in certain spaces, or especially just trying to show up in a different way, right, than we might be used to, because it takes intentionality, I think, to do things that are different from this, because it has been so almost ingrained in some of us, right? And like set up like this is the way in which we must do this work. And so I really appreciate that throughout this training that we do kind of come back to this and these topics multiple times, just to kind of remind ourselves, right? Like, not only are we talking about all of the challenges that sexual violence and racism and sexism and all the other things present, but we're also like working against all of these ways that we've been conditioned to think that we need to work and behave. And so even just, kind of sitting with it sometimes, while it might feel uncomfortable or kind of like, oh, whatever that might be, I think like that's part of the learning, right? And even when we talked in the beginning about like, we're always learning something new every time we're in any training, I think, or I always am, thinking about the ways that I show up in space, I think is important too, right? Besides even just like the content. And so like how I show up, how I receive information, my reactions, like all of those kinds of things. And so I love this slide and like specifically talking about it, because it is something I think that we don't always acknowledge, and especially in a lot of other types of trainings that aren't maybe more Indigenous focused, like I don't even know that it's acknowledged, right? And so I just wanted to say that, because I think it is one of those pieces that is so easily overlooked, because it's like, well, this is just the norm, right? And that's part of the beauty of having this training that is specifically focused and looking from a Native lens. So I just want to say that, and thank you for like walking us through that, Jolene.
And I just wanted to add one thing, Jolene. The one thing that on this slide that stands up for me is the worship of the written word. Because so many times we do reports and advocates have numbers and stats and all this stuff. But what about the stories? What about the successes? What about what people have overcome? You know, and where does the creativity and our culture encompass that? That's not the written word.
And as we go on to the next slide, we'll keep coming back, to this, because it's something that as we work to, indigenize or re-indigenize our work, that also means that we're having to really kind of break down some of those things that we think may be core to who we are, but are often these things that have been used as ways of, systemizing us or getting us to believe certain things. And so this is always a practice for us. Even, I realize that, I went through my first advocacy training 19 years ago, and thinking about like how much I have grown and changed since then. And even though, little teenage me thought that I knew everything in some ways, I really didn't. And how are we best able to, kind of come into space with, all 123 of us that are on this call, knowing that we're coming from different frameworks, that we're coming from different backgrounds. And while there may be some commonality amongst a lot of our lives and a lot of our stories, that we're coming to us both as individuals, but also as this collective breath, right? And so what we're able to do here is greater than what any of us could do as individuals. And so now that we've kind of laid that groundwork, we really want to make sure you have some of these logistics. So we have, as we've mentioned, our wonderful ASL interpreters who feel more like family because they're so integral to the work that we do. When we do go into breakout sessions, we will be working to make sure that we are, pairing folks who are requesting an interpreter to be in those spaces with them. And so please feel free to message Stephanie or one of the other co-hosts in order to make sure that we have that lined up. And just as you've seen, we are recording. And so that means that, well, we want people to be free and be able to kind of say what they want. Also know that this will be, shared with other people who have been, who have registered for this call, who may not be able to be on it. And it does just exist out there. And so we just want to make sure that there is that full transparency. I'm on some meetings where they're both recorded, and those recordings are, like public record. And so there's always this little bit about like making sure that I'm saying things that are still speaking my truth, but also just being watchful in case there's anything you don't want on a recording somewhere. And when it comes to confidentiality, we do ask that people keep what is said in the space, which is difficult when there is this recording. And so we ask you to use your discretion and your heart and your spirit when taking the good things from this and when you're sharing outward, right? We also want to make sure that even in these spaces that you're also maintaining the confidentiality of those stories that you will be sharing, right? It always comes up where people are sharing things from their family life, from the work that they've done. And we're wanting to make sure that both any sort of, confidentiality or privilege communication within that like legal sense is adhered to, but also that we're only telling stories that we're able to tell, right? And so we want to just kind of always be thinking about that. With that, there are many people in this room who are probably mandated reporters. And we'll talk much more about what mandated reporting actually is coming up. But for example, I'm a licensed social worker. And because of that, I have certain things that if they are said to me, I have to report. And so just always making sure that you're both aware of that within the space. Not that we want to curtail anybody's sharing, but we want to just acknowledge the reality that we're in, right? We will take breaks, and also take your own breaks as you need. These recordings will exist, and if you do miss something, you're always welcome to go back. And if there's anything that you ever need repeated, we are also here to just kind of have these conversations with you as needed, right? Well, this is, you know, a large training. We want to make sure that you are getting what you need out of this space, right? So take those breaks, but we will be having them on a regular basis throughout the training as well. Evaluations. Steph, would you talk about when the evaluations will come out?
Yep, we're going to be sending them out at the end of the training. So there's going to be one real quick one to go over. So we aren't going to be doing one per module. It's going to be one overall.
All right. So yes, and honestly, those evaluations are so important. And it isn't just like, and I want, as a kind of a side note, which you'll see is how I talk. These evaluations are really integral to shaping how we provide this training. We are also currently going to be undergoing very quickly a revamping of this. As you will see, and as just an acknowledgement, this training was started based in Minnesota. And so some of the things, well, we have, you know, extrapolated it and tried to make it relevant, you know, to broader communities. There are still some parts of it that what's on the page may not exactly resonate with you, right? And so if there is feedback on the actual slides or content as well, like these evaluations really do help shape us, which will then help shape, you know, the future work and the future growth of this movement, right? And the way that we're able to bring people in, especially for those who this may be some of their first time, like really being in a space that is focused on sexual assault. And so evaluations are important and not just something that we ask you to do just because we're supposed to. Throughout this time, stay hydrated. I feel that people are trying to call me out with my hydration. I often will have days where I'll have like 4 ounces of water, and that is not what a body needs. That is not what a spirit needs. Please stay hydrated within this time. I know it may sound silly, but it is so incredibly important to your spirit and to your body and to your ability to be in space with us as well. As I said earlier, please, we will not be offended if you are doing whatever, you know, soothes you, if you are doodling, if you are beading, if you are whatever it may be. Please take care of yourself. We understand that everyone's brains work a little bit differently. And while you may look like, if you're on camera, it may look like you're off, you know, doing something else, we do trust that you're in this space and that you're taking from it what you need. And take good care of yourself. There's no easier way to say it, but this stuff gets hard, and there's gonna be certain days where you might not even expect it. Like it may be like one of those, like some topics you can kind of know may like activate you or kind of cause you to feel certain things, but sometimes the world throws things at you in the weirdest sorts of ways. And we always want to make sure that you are taking gentle care of yourself. And sometimes that may mean that you have to step out of the training for the day. Sometimes that may mean that you need to go off camera when you typically are. And if you do need any support, please reach out to us as the hosts and co-hosts, and we will be there to provide whatever support we're able to in that moment, right? And we also want to say that as you get started in this, you know, I used to do advocacy trainings as part of my job, and I would often have people who were really wanting particularly to volunteer with a program, and then halfway through they'd realize this is not the right time for me to be going through this training. And that's okay to admit, and that is not any harm, and we will always welcome you back into space in the future. And so please just take care of yourself. All right, all of that heart stuff is where we land most of the time, but we also want to do some of those Zoom tips. So as we said, please try to keep your microphone muted. I also know that sometimes when you're logging in, your computer and your technology will do weird things. And a lot of you are not trying to have us listen to your conversations. And so once again, we'll try to always ask as a reminder, but if we do mute you, please know that's coming from a place of love and place of trying to make sure that the rest of the room is able to, you know, continue on with the space, right? So if we muted you, feel free to unmute later on, and we want to hear your voice. Video on or off, whatever works best. I tend to love to see people, but I also know there's reasons why people can't sometimes be on camera, and that's okay. We also ask that, like, if you're changing, please be off camera or things like that, right? There's certain things that we don't need to see about your day, but we do want to see your faces if you want. Use that chat box. We know that there's also the dual accessibility issue where sometimes reading the chat can be distracting, but especially since we have such a large group, we will be using the chat to be able to hear from you at times. And as presenters, we will also be working on trying to make sure that we're reading the chats out loud as appropriate, so that people are able to really fully be in this space. Steph, would you go back to or Deb, I don't know who's doing the slides right now. We are a team and doing it great. Use that reactions icon, heart our stuff, do whatever works at. So the little reactions, if you haven't, some people I know are Zoom experts and probably more so than me, but there's a little reactions where you are able to, you know, clap and, you know, laugh, all those sorts of things. And I hope there's laughter in this space. We talk about it being a heavy space, but sometimes you need a little laugh face coming at you, right? We also, if you have like a question or things like that, you're also welcome to raise your hand and we'll be kind of on the lookout for that. If we miss your hand, feel free to unmute and talk at us, right? We will be using breakout rooms because, for one thing, like these big spaces, it can be really hard to kind of express your thoughts. And so we'll be doing this mixture of like large group and small group work with the breakout rooms. And so you guys will have a little bit of time to, you know, interact and be with each other a little bit more that way. We'll also be using polling questions, both for some engagement, but also to be hearing from folks. And as we said, you know, use those 4 sacred elements, earth, fire. Oh, there we go. What is your familiarity with Zoom? We are leaning right into those polling. So let's test this out. What is your familiarity with Zoom? You are an expert. I am familiar for in person. I am still new to this. This is my first time. We'll leave this open for just a little bit longer. Good. So far, this is no one's first time. And as you can see, even though many of us have been using Zoom for many years, there's still little hiccups that happen in the different things. So we just want to, okay, so most people are pretty familiar with, a few who are still pretty new to this. So I am going to end the poll. And then we can also share the results so that folks can see what is going on. And yeah. All right. Anything else on the logistics side of things?
Just for an update, Jolene, it sounds like the captioning will be remedied on our next meeting, as it is a change that needs to happen once the meeting is ended. So apologies for that, but that will be remedied moving forward.
Thank you for that. We jumped, there we go. All right, so we did our first poll, but now we are going to take a little bit of time and go into breakout rooms. And so we'll give these instructions, and if somebody could also put those in the chat for folks. So we're just going to do some quick introductions because of this large space, we're not able to do those one-to-one introductions that we want and yearn to do. But so with it, when we put into these breakout rooms, we're going to have you just do some quick introductions with, you know, my name is, my gender pronouns are, I'm from, and if I were an element, I would be which of these: earth, fire, water, or air. So for example, I'm going to invite my coworker Becky to show us how this would look.
Oh, thank you. So I already shared, but my name is Becky. My gender pronouns are she, her. I am from, well, I guess I was born in South Dakota, but mainly was raised in Minnesota, but I'm back here now. And if I were an element, I think I would be today air. Something about just the wind and just kind of like, I imagine leaves blowing, which seems crazy. since it should be the middle of winter and snowy where I am right now. But looking outside, it reminds me of like almost a spring fall combo. So I'm going to go with air. And so then I would invite Deb to also introduce herself. And we're just kind of modeling a little bit before we go into the breakout room. So go ahead, Deb.
My name is Deb Bush, and my pronouns are her and she, and I'm from Akwesasne, Ontario. And if I was an element, I would be water because I love the ocean. I love any water, rivers, oceans, just as long as I'm on the water, I love.
All right. And then, so Steph, are you doing the breakout rooms for this?
I'm attempting to, yes. I want to make sure we assigned a few, but I could do the intro real quick. My name is Stephanie. My gender pronouns are her, she. I am from South Dakota also. And I feel I always relate with water. It is my healing element. I'm Pisces. This is where I go to be around with my children as a way to get away and heal. And we love to fish, and so we always are drawn to water. So I definitely feel like water is my element. And I'm going to be assigning some rooms out right now. So please bear with me, be patient, and I will get that going for you guys.
And we could do the poll while you're working on that too, Steph.
Oh, okay. 1 second. Sorry about that. Oh, we got to see everybody's face.
Hello. This
I'll
poll
get
is really just to
poll
help
going.
us get like more of a gauge of like where you are in your training, or if you've done a 40-hour before, that sort of thing. Just to give Steph a little time to get us all broken up into our rooms.
To relaunch. There we go.
So we're asking if you've ever participated in a 40-hour sexual assault training before. Either no, you haven't, this is your first time. Yes, that you did, but it was not a native focused training. Yes, you have, and it was native focused, or you're not sure. So just feel free to answer that in whatever way makes the most sense for you. I just love polls as like another way to check in with folks. Like not too many polls, but just enough that, we get a chance to contribute. So I don't know if you're looking at these results too, Jolene, but it looks like a lot of folks, this is their first 40-hour training, which is even more exciting. And lots of folks too who haven't participated in a native focused training either. So not sure if the results are sharing. Oh, here. Are folks able to see the results? Are we sharing? Awesome. Awesome participation also.
All right, Steph, are you good with the breakout rooms?
Getting there. Let me get rid of the poll.
And this one, we just wanted to make sure that we've got folks in rooms. And so if you specifically are in need of ASL in your breakout rooms and you happen to get into a room that does not work, just leave that room and come back and we'll make sure to get you into a room, or if there's anything else that you need us to be able to participate, just come back into the main space and we'll make sure to get you in a room that works better for you.
Okay, there we go. we moving?
You need support? No, you need to.
I'm sorry. I'm not usually on this side of everything, but I am doing my best here. Do I broadcast or have to close out again? Because I tried to do the let me see. Hmm.
We're just manually
But,
assigning folks of
Because it
how.
looked like it was assigning, and now it's not. So I
No,
don't.
we
I
need
mean,
to.
I don't- what's that?
We just need to start manually assigning because of how it's set up here. So that's fine. Just go through and just keep assigning folks.
Okay.
And like I said, if you end up in a room where you need anything additional from us, just let us know, please. And I think we'll be in the rooms for about 5 to 10 minutes or so.
Are you moving them in too? Okay. Hmm. Yeah, it's just making us manually assign you guys, so I apologize. We will get these kinks worked out for tomorrow.
I see some folks asking. There will be 2 groups. So there's a ASL interpreter in group 8. If folks can still hear us. So if you're needing that and aren't in that space, like I said, just send us a message or come back to the group. And I don't see where else you're assigning staff.
Okay, maybe I can focus on those while you're still putting people in. Let me see. Okay, Sarah said she was in 9, but she left. Okay, Mary. You said an 8.
Yes, I do see,
Okay, I can move her over to 8.
but you've got some of these groups that are very large. So I'm
Oh,
sure that
I've been trying to randomly put everybody into one. So what happened is we were trying to make sure that ASL interpreters were in one group, and so then it made us manually assign everybody. So that's what's going on. How can you see a large? Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Oh yeah, 8 is very big. And where's Sarah right now?
so all folks should be assigned to a room. You need to make sure to click to join the room. And then that will take you out of this group and into that space.
Thank you, Becky. So they have to accept to go in then?
They need to, yep. So the folks who are still sitting here in the main group would need to accept or join those groups they've been assigned into.
Wow, that was really confusing. Do you know where Sarah is? I'm still okay. No, Sarah's.
Yep, anyone who still can hear us speaking, would need to go in and join your breakout room.
Hi y'all. Are y'all doing good over here? Is there enough people here?
I'm still trying to see where Sarah is, and okay, she's in
Hmm.
9.
I haven't joined yet.
Okay,
So
good. I just wanted to make sure. Okay, thank you.
I didn't see the other person and I'm looking in the room, they didn't accept it yet.
Mhm.
So I'm just keeping an eye on that.
Okay, thank you, Hercules.
Yep, anyone who can hear us, if you're near your computer, can you click join into the rooms? Folks are waiting to get started in the breakouts in some of them.
Oh, she's saying she didn't get anything.
We already came back, Becky, in our group.
All right, Steph, I think we should give all the rooms their closing time, and we can invite people to chat things into the chat. And this was our first attempt at the breakout rooms with this group. And we will keep doing them and have them go smoother in the future.
It did.
Hi, sorry, I think I was in a breakout group, but I don't know if folks were present. I don't know if they had to step out, so and then it just came up that like, oh, the breakout groups are closing, so
I am sorry about our attempt to organize that. We will look into that and see how we can do that better tomorrow, or excuse me, on Thursday. But we do appreciate if you guys are able to, whoever didn't get a chance to
Courtney, can you go now, please?
go through the questions, and please just a reminder to mute yourselves again. The point, Autumn, was just so everybody gets to know each other and have that space with the breakout session, but I had set it up in I didn't set it up. We were trying to do one group for ASL, and the way I had it set up, it just had us manually do everything. So if you didn't get a chance to talk, I do apologize for that. And so please use the chat to go through again those questions that we had up. So let me share my screen again, everybody. And again,
And moving forward, if we use the breakouts, it'll be a much quicker, like you'll automatically go, you'll have your conversation and you'll come right back. So
All right, we will be getting back into this. If we can start the PowerPoint up again. All right, and so, well, I hope some folks were able to do their introductions. If not, we always do want to make sure that sometimes it's a good way to just do a little touch base with people. So the what element are you? Because that can change on a given day, right? And so I know that we're getting a little ahead of ourselves when it comes to like some practical tips, but sometimes it's a really interesting way to be like, oh, if somebody who you're around is normally air, what could it mean if they are, experiencing more with earth today, right? And so just different ways of like little checking in with each other and try to be there in a full way. So next, if you can skip over the next two slides. There we go. All right. So why a native focus 40-hour sexual assault training? And so this one, it's a little bit different than most of the for the folks who have already participated in 40 hours. We hope that this is a very different experience for you. We wanted to have a 40-hour sexual assault training that is, for us and by us. And so throughout this, we hope that we are going to be, embedding some Indigenous worldviews and just some things that are really going to be practical for both, our tribal communities in all of those unique ways, which is both talking about the sovereignty that we experience, as well as, the way that sexual assault happens within our communities. And so with this, it's going to, be leaning heavily on the experiences that we have had as advocates, and really wanting to be creating a really good collaborative environment. And so we want people to be sharing throughout this time. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about the why. We're also doing some examining of readiness. And so, well, you may say we can never fully be ready for an advocate, or what would it mean to not be ready to be an advocate? We just want to have a little bit of exploration of that. We're going to talk a little bit about the root causes of sexual violence in Indian country, and really talk about that link between advocacy and activism.
Man, what's that admin app that you said?
All right, next slide, please. All right. So why a 40-hour sexual assault advocacy training? So just as a little bit of a background, as I said, this training was originally intended for our tribal programs in Minnesota. But when it came down to it, there's very few Native specific or Native designed advocacy programs out there. And so particularly once the pandemic started, we were just having so many requests for us to go, into community or to virtually be able to provide this for new advocates within our movement. And so the reason that this is 40 hours, which some of it, as you'll see, will be doing a certain amount of like kind of classroom hours, which is what this would be, as well as some sort of homework hours, which, may include some, connection with your local community, like talking to local law enforcement or talking to your local hospital, doing field trips and things like that, that we aren't able to provide for everybody. But it is 40 hours because that is based on what the Minnesota statute requires to be able to have privileged communication within a sexual assault program. And so that is why it's 40 hours. And the parts that are in it are built around what our state funders at that time were saying were the requirements. And so we have taken those, and while we hold true to the core of what they are, we've made it something that works best for us within our tribal communities. And so each of your states may have slightly different requirements. Some states may be 30, some states may be 45. Some states may have other little requirements that you may have to kind of supplement, but this is what it's based around. And so for the most part, we found that it works in most communities. But yeah, that is why this is the way it is. So within Minnesota in particular, after you've attended a 40-hour training, you have to be under the purview, working under a supervisor of a rape crisis center. And so those are the two elements that add to this privilege. But we know that there's a lot of people who take this training simply because either they are in related fields or related lines of work, or you are somebody who is just doing on the ground advocacy in your community that is never going to be, a part of a program, but you are feeling called and tied to, providing the support that, your relatives and friends and people in your space need. But so if you folks have wondered why it's a 40-hour curriculum, this is why. Next slide. All right. So why Native specific? And I'm going to talk a little bit. I'm going to invite my coworkers, and we'd also love to hear from folks about, especially those who've attended a different 40-hour, like, why are you also attending this one? Like, what are you hoping to kind of like get out of this very unique space? And so why Native specific? I mean, at its core, a large part of it is simply because there's such a highly disproportionate rate of violence that happens to us as Native people. To our Native women, men, children, Two-Spirit, everybody who falls under that Indigenous spectrum, both on reservation and off. The rates are, this one says 55%. We've seen anywhere, from 20 to 90%, depending on what study you're looking at. But regardless of those numbers and what metrics people are using, we know that within our communities, it would be hard to find a family or a person who is not impacted themselves or within one person that they love, right? And so we've recognized that how it happens and what has really caused us to have such such disproportionate rates that means that we need to be able to provide support in different kind of ways. And so what is working in a lot of, what some folks may call like a mainstream program may not always work for the Indigenous survivors that we're seeing. And the trainings that we receive from historically, like white programs may not resonate with us as Native people, right? So we want to acknowledge that, like with the tribal nations have different sovereign and inherent authority to self-govern. And throughout this time, we'll explore what that looks like in the different levels, especially when it comes to the more system side of things, such as working with law enforcement and prosecution, and both the opportunities that can come with having that sovereignty, and then sometimes those jurisdictional issues that have really kind of created a lot of harm or confusion for survivors. As we said, this was designed to meet the Minnesota state requirements, but it's trying to parallel the state requirements that we've also seen. But we want to make sure that we are still being who we are and presenting this in a way that hopefully resonates with folks. We've had people who have taken, issue with the fact that we are so native focused, but that is who we are, and that's all that we can be, and we are unapologetic in that way. And so also knowing that both the historical impact is so incredibly powerful, and translating that to what does this look like for the current day. And so I think that the more that we're able to know about the historical trauma and the historical legal ramifications of different things, the better we can do to provide services today. We're really hoping that through this, we're able to talk more about how advocacy isn't simply just service provision, right? That is something that even our funders will sometimes say that is what we do. But at our heart, we know that it is about, restoring balancing within our communities, within us as individuals, and that it's not simply a quick fix or a way that we're able to that we need more than just service provision. We need things that are really linking us to all of those different areas of, our spirit, our mind, our body, and all the different ways that we feel, as well as whatever way we want to try to seek justice, right? And so we're hoping that through this training, we're able to kind of provide that baseline for folks to be able to kind of learn and launch from. We also want to say that, we'll be sending out all these links and all this information, but with this being based on Minnesota state statute, as Becky just put into the chat, there's also links out there for all of the other state statutes. And this may not be the most recent link, but we can also find you, we can help you locate information within your own local area. We also know that while there are a growing number of tribal coalitions such as MUSAC, there's many states and that therefore many tribes also that don't directly have that coalition support. And if you happen to be in a community where there isn't a coalition, we're able to connect with you or help to find somebody even more local to you that can help you navigate some of these things. So.
And just as a note, Jolene, I did share that link. I can't tell for sure how it went into the chat, but it's a link that's really breaking down the confidentiality statutes per state. And the reason that's important is relating directly back to Jolene's point, right? About each state or tribe or, nation. There are going to be different, that's a lot of what helps dictate even what the requirements are for the 40-hour, right? Because it's looking at things like confidentiality, privilege, those types of things. And so that is the correlation between looking at confidentiality statutes and what you are going to see in that document, and the need for having that 40-hour training or certification or whatever it is, it might be that your location requires. So that's what that link is going to be taking you to specifically.
If you can go back, actually. So any of the MUSAC folks, is there anything else you'd add about why we have a 40-hour that's tribal specific or native specific?
I would, this is Debbie again. I would just like to say that I think it's important because every tribe, even though we have some similarities, every tribe is unique and different, and the practices and their culture. And so they're really the experts in their community, with jurisdictional. So it's really important to understand all the complex issues with sexual assault within tribal communities.
Yeah, I would also love for people either to chat in or to come on live and talk about, why do you think that a native specific training is important? Also name, I am excellent with silence. And I would love to just be hearing from folks because the more that we're able to hear from you all, the more that learning from each other and that you're also practicing what we're hoping. So why did you attend a Native specific 40 hour?
Hey, can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay, my name is Deanna Cosby. I work for the Osage Nation tribe in Pawhuska, Oklahoma. I just feel like, I mean, I think that there's obviously multiple reasons. Definitely the sovereignty plays into it, but I also feel like sometimes whenever you go to agencies that don't have that that Native American like education there, that it can feel very run of the mill, like you're a number on a page, you know, whereas we can really focus on helping them heal spiritually, get them back in touch with their culture. And I obviously I work with a large Native population, so I think that it's very key.
So somebody asked us a question in the chat, Jolene. Why do we put on a Native training like this?
Yeah, and I feel that I tried to answer that. And so if anybody else has any ways of doing that, that is great. But I see that there's things that are happening within the chat, you know, because our systems of care don't address the specific needs of Native people and haven't been built to support them. I echo that very much so. Create safe spaces for you to learn about what this training has to offer, space where Native voices are centered and uplifted, because the statistics within Native communities are very high and is unspoken within tribes. Listina.
Hello. So I would say like the reason why we have this is because I feel like as Native people, we have our own specific issues and we have our own reasons for sometimes not wanting to involve the police. And sometimes we need to know that there's another Native American advocate out there that can help us, whether it's sexual violence or domestic violence. I think that it's important that we see somebody who looks like us and who may not require us to talk to multiple people. So I think the more Native advocates we have that can fill the roles, the better off that we will be. And I feel like maybe that'll give people more permission to come forward and speak about their assaults.
Thank you so much, Listina. Kathleen?
So why I'm taking it, I live in the state of Missouri. There is no, I call it a non-indigenous state because we have a community here, we're urban setting, but we have no resources here. So that's why I'm taking it. So we have somebody here that represents us.
Thank you so much for that. I think that's such a key thing as well. I see a couple of hands raised. I'm not sure the order, so if someone will can please go.
Hi, my name's Amber. I think part of why the Native specific training is important is because it's been proven that trauma is passed down through our DNA. And there is so much trauma in like the history of Native people, and to be able to understand that and the fact that it's passed down, maybe you didn't even know your great grandparents, but your DNA, you're dealing with their trauma. So I think that that's why this is so important.
Thank you, Amber. I think there's another Amber who has their hand raised as well. So let's go to that.
Hi, this is Amber Warman. I actually have met some of you guys in person. I just wanted to say thank you again for putting on the training. I've actually been to your training in person in Minnesota back in, I think, 2018. And I learned so much from the multiple presenters and speakers that you guys had. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to, again, refresh learn. I'm back in advocacy where I was doing the training before, and it's a different feeling when you're working with victims of remembering to be centered, to remember that every client that works in is a sister or a brother and needs my help and support in a way that only we can really care for them, because when they go to other organizations that are non-native, a lot of times they aren't heard, they aren't seen, their trauma isn't seen, the multiple reasons why they haven't come forward or are not going to report isn't seen or heard. And so just being here and being a safe place where they can get some sage, where they can get some sweetgrass, where they can have, even just if all I have to give them is water, and remind them to go home and to shower and pray with their water and take whatever lessons they need from me and pass it forward, because I've learned from you guys and I want that information to carry forward. And I hope that everyone here takes something away from your training and is able to bring it forward to just one more person, because that one more person is going to share. And that is how we continue to break generational and historical traumas and bring back our native traditions. So we're breaking those cycles so our children can be back in full circle. So hopefully someday they will be healed. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you for that. I'm not quite sure. Is it Durawa?
My name is Droa. I used to work at the American Indian Community Housing Organization in Duluth, Minnesota, in their children's program, and I definitely want to echo all of the wisdom everyone has shared and add to that. That now that I'm working in more dominant culture spaces, I think that Native specific training and working and centering those who are most at the margins creates better programs for everyone as well. So I feel like when we prioritize Native experiences and stories, I think that we can better deal with the stories and experiences of everyone else going forward.
Thank you. Holyoke?
Hi, my name is Holyoke Lafferty, and I am not here as a representing any organization. I am just here as a woman who I'm now in a place of my life where I feel like I can approach this. I've always had a drive and a calling to it. I'm a survivor of multiple uh, SA, and I'm a mother of daughters with survivors, and I'm a daughter, and I honestly can't think of any relative female specifically, and a lot of males in all of our communities, like and people I've met throughout my life that are not survivors of some form of SV or SA, and it's a rarity that you meet someone or come across a relative who has never been had that experience. And during my own experiences throughout my life in the different capacities, I've been able to have the support of Indigenous um, uh, advocates. I'm sorry. And it truly has brought me so far in my life that I'm in a place of real balance and healing, and I feel it's now my time to give back to our community in this way that has blessed me, and just would be a representative as an individual person, that can be a safe place for other folks, and they're aware of the training and the knowledge that I carry, and helping them navigate through their own experiences when it's so scary sometimes to go to like institutions or organizations. And maybe my path will lead me down, that route I don't think that there's anything, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but in the Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation, and I'm going to be in the process right now of moving back home from Minnesota. And so I would love to be an anchor or a contributor to bringing something like this into our reservation there.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of the comments in the chat. I mean, I think that, well, I've always believed that we need this Native specific training to hear from everybody, and hearing those different, I don't know, that was just a very powerful moment. So thank you all for that. Oh, Jess, before we move on.
Thank you. My name is Jess Grams, and I work in Minneapolis at Little Earth Residents Association. I really want to echo a lot of what I've been hearing about how I want to serve my relatives, but also I want to say that really for me, mean, when I heard about this training, I immediately got very excited. I went to my boss and was like, please, please, I know it's just around the corner, but could I do this? And they went for it because they knew how much, serving an all Native community, it was going to be so, so helpful. But I really wanted to say that for me as a survivor that didn't really gain my Indigenous community until much later in my life because I'm an adoptee, there's really a mindset shift that happens when all of a sudden you switch from spending time with people that don't believe you, you're in dominant mindset institutions, and they say, oh, yes, we believe you about XYZ, but yet nothing can happen. And then all of a sudden you're spending time in spaces where people believe you. And there's just a normalization of you being able to use your voice and talk about your experience. And that was so powerful that I immediately knew I wanted to try to open it up and be more prepared to maybe make that happen for other people or make it more possible, if that makes any sense. So.
Very much does. Thank you so much. All right, if we could go to that next slide then. All right, so, an hour into this, we're finally talk a little bit about what is advocacy. And it really is, that's the thing, like the word advocate and the word advocacy has its role in a lot of different spaces. And so we will be using it kind of in one way, but also knowing that people will be, that we're all advocates in our own right, right? And so when we talk about this, we are talking about the folks who may be, working at programs like that are focused on sexual assault or domestic violence as well, those dual or multi-service programs. But also knowing that advocacy isn't just one thing, right? Advocacy isn't simply going to the hospital with somebody. Advocacy isn't simply just, listening and being in space. There's so many things that an advocate does, and it's overlapping and building upon so many different parts. Like you are often the person who is the connector. You are the person who sometimes you act as almost like, you can be the warrior or the voice, working alongside somebody. It's not the perfect analogy, but last summer, I did a presentation at Women Are Sacred, and it was kind of because we'd had this conversation about like, what are those different roles that advocates really play? And one of those ways was, almost acting as a doula during this time in life when people are needing support. So you're able to be that person who knows a lot of the information and can also help guide people to, make the decisions that are going to be maybe best for them, right? How you can't know all the answers and you can't know all the different nuances, but you're able to be there with folks. It is grassroots, and that is something that our work has gotten more and more professionalized, over the years. That's why I'm a licensed social worker, is because at the point in time when I was becoming an advocate, I had to be a licensed social worker basically in order to get positions that would pay me a living wage, right? And so we went through this like hyper professionalization spell where everyone was expected to have, certificates and all these sorts of things. And even though it says a degree was not required, for a while, it felt that it almost was in some communities, particularly in non-tribal communities. And now I think that we're really returning to the fact that, advocacy isn't a stepping stone to another career, right? Advocacy isn't meant to simply be something that people do while they are, like fresh out of college. That advocacy is its own unique calling that we have. that even if you've stepped out of it, like those of us who are now, you know, trainers or whatever we are, that at our core, it's different, right? That because that we value lived experience, that we value people who are both quiet and those who are louder, that we value whatever you may be bringing to the table, and that within this work, we all do have a space. When we're thinking about advocacy, one of those big things is we're really trying to take away that power differential that can often happen if you're thinking about like advocacy is not therapy, right? How we are not meant to be having this like hierarchy between us and the survivors. There's not meant to be that difference. Somebody has already talked about this idea of like, you are my sister, you are my brother. How we're really, well, there's, it's not a perfect thing, but how we are really meant to be relative to relative, human to human, right? How even though you may have some specific information about the way that systems work or the things that normally happen, that we're really just there with somebody, and we're not over somebody, right? And there is this part of advocacy that's also action oriented, right? How within that, there's steps we have to take. It's not just passive. And so we're taking action, we're supporting survivors as they take action, and really kind of being in that space. And so that's kind of like the general part, right? And so there is this like direct advocacy that comes with, working with like one person and being able to just be fully there and biased support of this person, right? We are sometimes the only advocates, or sometimes the first person that people disclose to. And we're also sometimes in the midst of all these other things that are happening in their life, the one person that can be fully just there for them, without our own, like we're not trying to force people to do things that like we want them to do, where we're just there for them. And so in addition to that level of advocacy, one of the things that you'll see throughout this whole entire training is that intersections between systems and social change. And so we want to equip you all to do the best we can with doing that direct advocacy, that one-to-one work within community. And we also have to be thinking on that more macro level, thinking about how are we working with the systems and societies that have caused sexual assault to be so prevalent? And what can we be doing to change and inform those systems? If we don't address the conditions that cause this to happen, we're just going to keep getting very good at helping one survivor after another versus really working towards prevention and working towards social change where we can have healthier communities. And if we're thinking of that whole of, with so many of us, this violence has happened, for generations and generations and generations. And so we can be that generation that stops things, right? We can be creating better worlds for our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, for those who aren't our relatives, but are our relatives because we are all linked, right? And we have that power as individuals, but more importantly, collectively. We hold so much power in that beautiful way. And so we'll be talking about both, how our role is both with the individual, but also with working at changing systems. And even though sometimes advocates, even particularly within our tribal communities, are often housed within programs such as behavioral health or within law enforcement or other things where you get a little, where your unbiased is sometimes like questioned, but we can also be working with you on thinking about how can you really still be that confidential and unbiased support, even within systems that sometimes want you to, to be a part of them versus standing outside those systems. MUSAC staff, anything else you'd like to add in?
Well, I would just like to say that I thought you did a fantastic job on that, Jolene, and the whole thing about that, the culture and the kindness is, we are one big community and one big family, and it is, like you're not I'm not better than, or but I'm there to help you. Here's a lending hand and let's do this together.
Thank you, Deb. All right. Please chat in anything else. I see that there's some great things already in the chat, including, this return to care from and by community is healing justice. And that is so integral and something that we should keep with us through this whole training. So, all right, next slide. What do advocates do? I kind of give spoilers because I'm not very good at staying on point with PowerPoints, but we're standing with and working with, right? We're not necessarily doing things for people, right? I think that's one of the things that frustrates me is that even in 2024, there is this misconception out there that somebody who has had sexual violence done to them are somehow broken and unable to stand up for themselves, right? And while we don't want to lean in too much to the fact that we have to be so resilient, at the same point, advocates are not meant to be saviors. We are not meant to fix people who are broken, right? Like there's this mentality out there that, people who've been sexually assaulted are broken, and we're not. And we have to be there as advocates to be able to stand with people. There's times where you may be the one who's actually picking up the phone and things like that. But everything that we do is in collaboration with survivors and for their benefit. And we are not standing outside of them, and we're not trying to do our own kind of like focus of like, we really think that you need to, report this to the police, right? And that we're not putting our own feelings upon somebody else, for example, right? A lot of what advocates do is listening, right? It is something that you're having to slow your mind a little bit and truly just be present with somebody, and not just hearing the words, but hearing somebody's heart and spirit in those moments, right? And really believing. There was, that campaign, I think it probably still exists, start by believing. Because so often, how many people on this call, in our families, in our lives, have the first person you told not believed or dismissed or thought that it couldn't be that, like that couldn't have happened, or that couldn't have happened like that, or that somebody's exaggerating, right? Or that we even start to sometimes question ourselves, right? Whether or not something was a sexual assault or all these sorts of things. But what an advocate does is believe. And there'll be times where this gets tested. I think back even on the first time I went to the hospital with somebody, I had, the law enforcement pull me aside and they're like, do you believe that this happened? And it was one of those moments, because I was so new to this work. I'm just like, oh, we're still at that point where people are asking that simple, like, and how are we best able to be like, no, we always believe, right? And so I think that is core to what we do. We're assisting, we're supporting, we are helping people through a system that they should never have to know how to navigate, right? And sometimes, even though this does happen so often in our Native communities, we often don't talk about it, right? And so how are we best able to kind of provide words or provide language to help people understand that while this may be normal in some ways because it happens to so many people, it's not normal, and it's not the way that that our lives should be lived out, and that our bodies and our sexuality are our own, and no one can take that from us, right? And so we're having to sometimes help educate survivors even about what is going on, as well as helping to navigate, those different systems, because it gets confusing. It's hard enough for those of us who have been doing it over and over, because something weird always happens, right? But let alone a survivor who should never have to go through this. And you are already, stressed at your max with, like daily life. And then you have all of this sort of stuff that's kind of thrust upon you that you're having to kind of work with and walk through. And it can be a lot. And so sometimes we're that calming presence who can help to find that center. And so when people have questions, you are there, right? And we're also meant to understand like how that whole system flows and how they're going to probably respond, right? We are biased in support of survivors. We are survivor-centered to the fullest. We are led by survivors. Our program should be led by survivors. All of our programs that we run should be both led by or informed by survivors on the ground. And because it's something that we need to have, and that working directly with victim survivors, we said, and working how to change the systems. And really at the heart of it though, like, we want to be able to, support. So the reason I got into advocacy is because I had, well, in addition to like all of the other, things that I'd seen in my life, I had one friend and I didn't know how to help her, right? And I was also kind of confused about like all these things that I saw that were stemming, from her sexual assault. And I wanted to best understand and to be able to provide support. And so, but from that, I recognized all of the things, in my life, in my family, in all of those things I'd seen, that I'm like, oh, this is endemic to our culture and to our communities. And this is everybody's responsibility to create change, right? And so, our vision and our mission isn't, supporting, like singular survivors. It's working to end sexual violence, right? And that includes working to end racism. That includes working to fight against some of the capitalism that has caused us to be the way that we are. And the ableism that exists within our communities, and the heterosexism, all these sorts of things that we'll continue to talk about, but it is core and integral to the work that we are doing in sexual assault advocacy, right? And so working to change the social norms to me is inextricable from helping each and every survivor that we will work with, and that we will hold, and that we will hold their stories and the things that have happened to them and have been done to them. So anything else to add, either from USAC staff or anybody who wants to chime in?
This is Becky, Jolene. I have so many thoughts on everything you just said. And I think, like one of the greatest gifts I think that a person can have when they're going through something, or they've experienced a crime, or specifically sexual assault or sexual violence, is an advocate. Like whether that's in name or in the support or whatever it is, right? To speak to that, like you don't have to have a degree to be an advocate. And so I just have loved everything you said. And even looking at the chat here, someone's commented that sometimes, advocates are the only ones that are standing with the victim. I think that can be, unfortunately the case, and really thinking about, you're there to support that person in that moment or in that time of their life, but your impact has a ripple effect, right? Because you are there, they have the support that they need. Because someone else sees you, right? Because law enforcement sees you, they know that there are services available for other folks they come in contact with. Because you might come into a courtroom, folks see you there, and they, it kind of ripples out, and other people know about services that are available. They see that others are holding systems and perpetrators accountable, right? Like all those other things that come along with like doing this work as a community, because this isn't a burden that should rest on survivors and solely on survivors. And so I think that can be one of the beautiful things about advocacy, is because, whether we're survivors or not ourselves, like you are representing survivors, right? Like you are helping to be that voice and support, and sometimes like physical manifestation even of survivors in our communities. So we keep bringing that forward, like this is happening, this is impacting us. There are survivors everywhere, right? And that like there's a place for survivors in how we respond in our communities. And so I just think, like I said, advocacy is just one of those callings. It's a profession too, right? It's a job. If we get lucky enough to be able to do this work as a job and be paid for it, great. But it's a calling. And I think it's just one of the beautiful things, I think, just being able to be there and support someone. And I see here talking, Jackie's talking about being a doula, community organizer, and just, like, it isn't just, hi, I'm an advocate, right? You can be an advocate and so many other things. So all of that. And I thought I saw someone with their hand raised, but maybe it went away. But thank you, Jolene.
I also think one of the things that comes up for me, like when I was talking about, education, and I think some of it's also, it's educating, the other people who, survivor may come into contact with about the reality of sexual assault, right? We get so many questions about, about the truth of when an assault happened, but also really helping to lay out what are the impacts of trauma, and especially of, trauma across the lifespan. And we'll get much more into this as we move forward. But I think also another part is some of what an advocate can do, particularly within our tribal communities or within our urban centers who are serving Indigenous survivors, is be that connection to culture. Because with the complexities of identity of, being Indigenous, sometimes that's one of those things that people are either like running away from or they're running towards, right? After an assault, where culture should be one of those healing things. And a lot of times folks have been kept away from it because of displacement and things like that, or because of past trauma that had happened. But also it's something that we as advocates are also able to hopefully provide that connection to folks. Alexandra?
Sorry, I had it up before and then I was like, no, because my dogs are being crazy in the background. But one thing I was just gonna say, actually, Jolene, 100%, 100% what you just said. Totally agree. I feel like on the flip side, where I've seen things get really tricky is we do work and live in small communities, and it can get really messy when it does come to trying to use culture either as like a reconnection tool, or maybe folks are already involved in community and cultural practices and all of these things, but that it can cause more toxicity to that person, depending of course on the situation, the community, and all the things. But it breaks my heart that that happens. But yes, going back to what you said, 100%, I just wanted to name that because I know that it happens. And that also just goes back to what advocacy is, and what that looks like is it might be that you're the only person, not even in a professional capacity, that is helping a victim survivor navigate this, because it can be really hard. It can be really hard. And, there's so many different things that go and play into that. But I just wanted to name that.
Thank you so much for that. All right. And we will dive more deep into some of these things also that I've seen like within the chat later on within this 40-hour. But so thank you all. Next slide. I don't know why I keep doing this like little dance whenever slides get changed. I feel that like I need a little movement, and we're going to take a break here in just not too long just to name this. But when we're talking about examining advocate readiness, normally, like if we're in person, we would be doing this kind of like as a standing exercise and getting to like really know and talk about some of these things. But so what we're going to do is kind of really think about how there's some things that like within our own selves, like we think maybe, black and white, or that there is like, a right or wrong answer. And for others, there's not, right? And so I think that one of the exercises that comes with being an advocate is learning to balance our personal selves with what community and the collective group of us need, right? And so I'm going to read some questions or some statements. I apologize. And I would love folks to, chat in, do you strongly agree, somewhere in the middle?
Somewhere in the middle, strongly.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
strong-
here it is. I got it. You can do yours on there.
And yeah, and so just kind of want to see where people are. And then I'd love if people are willing to kind of talk about why they said the different things. To be clear, there is not necessarily a right or wrong to this. We're not trying to trick anybody. And if you happen to disagree with folks, that's a-okay. And that's where we're at and why we're doing this. All right. And so the first question I'm going to ask, or first statement I'm going to say is, children are not sexual beings. Do you strongly agree, somewhere in the middle, or strongly disagree? Children are not sexual beings. All right, seeing some things come in. All right, we're seeing a lot of strongly agrees within there.
I'm back in, but it's freezing up again.
All right. All right, I would love to hear, please keep chatting in. And I'd love to hear from somebody who strongly agrees? Somebody who strongly agrees that children are not sexual beings, and explain a little bit like what that framework is.
Hi. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, sorry. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So for me personally, I think I put strongly agree because in my brain, my thought process was like children are not inherently sexual beings. Like they're not like meant to be sexual beings. Like yes, they experience sometimes sexual feelings or sexual urges, but that's not like inherently what they are or should be seen as. So that's kind of where my brain went with that. And I think personally it just comes from like me experiencing childhood sexual assault and being like, okay, adults probably think weirdly about children and I don't love that, so I'm gonna say strongly agree.
Thank you for that. And one of the people who strongly disagreed or leaned towards disagreeing, would you be willing to share your thoughts?
I can go. So I was thinking of it not from like the sense of like a very, very young child, but I'm thinking about it as like kids go through puberty, like start developing sexual feelings, and it's normal to be curious about your own bodies. I am talking outside, like just from a developmental standpoint, not related to assaults or childhood sexual abuse or anything like that, but purely from the developmental point of that we are inherently curious about our bodies. We go through puberty. Those all of those what's the word I'm thinking of, hormones and all of those things are very real, and in turn make us sexual beings. So that's where I was coming from.
Thank you for that. Listina.
So we were talking and we thought it was somewhere in the middle because I believe that we're all born with that desire to procreate. And I think there's some kids who will express like having a crush on a girl or having a crush on a boy, or like some adults who say, I knew when I was 5 years old that I was two-spirit or I was homosexual. So I think that it's somewhere in the middle.
Thank you so much for that. And that's kind of like, I love this conversation because it's such a simple statement in some ways, but there's a lot of different ways that you can interpret things, as well as those different frameworks that we have to always be kind of thinking about where we're coming from with our own understanding, and all those sorts of things. And so thank you for that one. We'll do a couple more of these. When a woman says no, she means maybe. When a woman says no, she means maybe. Do you strongly agree, somewhere in the middle, or strongly disagree?
Jolene, could you ask that again? I'm sorry. Sometimes I have a hard time getting these questions when it's like everything in front of me.
Oh, of course. Yes. So the statement was, when women say no, she means maybe. Or when a woman says no, she means maybe. All right, we're mostly seeing a lot of, strongly disagrees coming out within this. Good, yeah. And what's interesting is that, normally, like, we have a lot more kind of in the middle on that. Very rarely do we see, like a strongly agree with things. But it's been interesting because so just to name what some of the past conversations really were around how sometimes within our culture and within our community, not within our culture, but within our society, so often we are not trained to, talk about or advocate for our own sexual wants or needs, And so that's why I think sometimes people have been kind of like, you know what, sometimes some people are saying it, right? Or like people have thought, like even within their own heads, like, oh, I can think of a time in my life where I, you know, didn't strongly say yes or didn't strongly say no. So my maybe actually meant yes. Which is not saying that that's, you know, accurate or correct, but it's just something to kind of like really be thinking about, like where are our own biases, where are our own thoughts that have kind of come forward. All right.
Awesome.
The next statement is prostitution is a choice. Prostitution is a choice. Strongly agree, somewhere in the middle, strongly disagree. We are seeing a mix on these, a lot of middles, and then some folks who strongly agree or strongly disagree.
I was just noticing how many middles on this one, Jolene.
Which is interesting because I feel that this has shifted over like the course of time and probably even like the group that's participating. The question was, Holyoke, prostitution is a choice. Agree, middle, disagree. Amber?
I just want to say, as someone who my sister, a close friend, she was a stripper and also became a prostitute. And I think that sometimes it can be misconstrued that it's someone's choice because, oh, they're making the money or they're getting something out of it. And the reality is, if she had been afforded food, water, shelter, a vehicle, been available to take care of her children in a good way, that she wouldn't have needed to do those things in the first place to get the money. Sometimes that's the only option, or that's the only option that they think that they have because that's what's around them. And I live in North Dakota. She's all the way out in Ohio, so it is a different circumstances, but I see it here in North Dakota as well. I actually work at a Native American community center, and right near the community center, there is a homeless shelter. So I see a lot of human trafficking as well in our Native community, unfortunately. And I also know that these women come from a place of a lot of broken homes and a lot of things going on in their personal lives where this isn't their first choice. This is a choice that they've had to make because, again, they don't have other options, they don't have other opportunities. And some of them, on top of that, when you look into, it's the word I'm looking for, they're almost like led into this as children, like this is all that they have. Groomed is the word I was looking for, I'm sorry, but they're groomed into thinking that this is okay, that if they do this, that, you know, oh well, dad's proud of you, even, you know, like, oh, you're such a good girl, like you're making money for the house, like I'm so proud of you. And that's a weird mentality, like, but not all of us can see that because we haven't grown up around it. We don't understand that that is the only choice that they had. It's not something that they would want to be doing if they had other options. So I mean, again, it's kind of the world we live in too, right? Because if they had a garden, if they had a community, if their aunts and uncles and mothers and fathers supported and loved them and cared for them, would this be the option that they would go to? Probably not, but we don't have those. Our communities are very broken and we don't have food and resources. And so sometimes just having our basic needs met causes us to do things we would never do. So that's my answer. Strongly disagree.
Thank you for that. Kiki?
So I will just be open and say that I still do sex work. I've used sex work as a tool for survival, but also just want to clarify that it can be a job for people as an adult consensual worker. You know, as some folks have mentioned, there's stripping, there's camming, there's it's just a really huge spectrum when we're talking about adult consensual work, which is way different, right, than coerced or non-consenting types of work. And also, there's a spectrum of care with that too. So like I have supportive community. I am also an advocate in community. I also, you know, it's a part, can be a part of someone's identity. But I think the goal is that people that are doing that type of work have the same type of respect and access to care and systems as anybody else, because it is just that for some folks. And I do want to just respect and recognize the amount of harm and abuse that is also involved in all forms of work, but specifically towards sexual bodies as well. So yeah, sorry, I'm a little also like scared to admit that in front of 130 people, but if I'm an advocate in my day-to-day, then I do want to speak my truth as well, that being seen as a victim has caused me to not be able to access services and not be able to navigate spaces that I think should be available for all people. So I also want to say with that, I am in the middle with this because there are many people, like I said, who experience abuse in this space because of our societal views on sex and bodies and consent. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I think that, you know, I really do want to thank everybody who's, you know, sharing and being vulnerable, because it is hard. And it's a practice when we're also asking, you know, survivors to be able to speak these hard truths, or not even hard truths necessarily, speak honestly and openly with us. That sometimes we don't always have to like disclose our own stuff, right? You know, but we also have to understand that, you know, it's hard for survivors as well. And so we really want to thank you for sharing that. And let's see, I think Alexandra might have been next.
Yeah, and thank you, Kiki, for sharing your story and where you're at. I forgot to put my hand down, but I was coming from more of like the professional lens, and then also just personal experience that I have with people that have been exploited. And so it aligned a lot with what Amber Warman had been talking about. I work within Safe Harbor Services, all of those types of things. And so I was coming from it similar to how Amber had expressed it. So that was it. Just forgot to put my hand down.
Perfect. Thank you. We'll do a few more. I'll try to get through the hands that are raised now, and then we'll be moving on. Let's go, Naya.
Yes, hello. I think so I was somewhere in the middle, simply because of the like terminology that was used. Um, so for me, I work with a lot of people who engage in consensual sex work. And I think the reason why I was in the middle with this is because prostitution to me has like very negative connotations. So in my head, I'm thinking prostitution is more along the lines of people who are trafficked or are given no other choice but to engage in sex work. And to me, when I use the terminology sex work, I also leave space for those who do consensually choose that as a job. So that's why I'm somewhere in the middle with it, because like the terminology of prostitution it has like that negative connotation, so I wasn't quite sure where I wanted to fall.
Yes, and that's one of the things, right? You know, like these different words can really carry they can resonate in different sorts of ways with people, right? I didn't make up this list, right? But that wasn't some, I think I'm just going to name probably something that was intentional to be thinking about how does that word resonate. Becky?
Yeah, I was somewhere in the middle too, and I think like other people have said, you know, we've just heard for years, this is victimization, and we think, gosh, who would choose that? Obviously, this isn't something that they want to do. But then you hear from people like Kiki and others who are like, no, I don't feel like I'm a victim. I'm just a very sex positive person. I feel empowered in this way. It's on my terms and I'm making money. And it's just a totally different perspective. And it's still hard for me to grasp that somebody would enjoy that, but that I see what they're saying. That makes sense. And I don't want to dismiss that perspective. They know what they're talking about.
Thank you for that. And then Tyrell.
Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes, we
Okay.
can.
Okay, great. So first, I do 100% want to recognize the privilege that I'm coming at this with as a, cisgendered man approaching this subject that, vastly affects, women and, other marginalized genders more often than it does men. That being said, while it is echoing what other people have said, I think it is very, very important that we do remember and recognize that sex work is work, and that we don't denigrate people who do that voluntarily. Like, full disclosure as well, I put myself through part of college working at a strip club as a DJ, and saw the entire gamut of positive and negative people who were working in that field. Everything from people who did it to feed a substance use addiction, who did it because they were possibly being trafficked, and all the way to a good personal friend of mine to this day who is highly educated. She has 2 master's degrees and still chooses to dance professionally because she enjoys it, makes a lot of money doing it, and finds a lot of personal freedom in that field of work. Again, 100% recognize that there is a vast ocean between voluntarily performing sex work and all the negative aspects that we see in our field. But I do want us to keep in mind that there are both sides of the spectrum. So that was all.
Well, thank you all for sharing. And I do want to, we're going to, for sake of time, kind of be moving on. But at the same point, I think for one thing, we will be talking a lot more about this, when it comes to our sex trafficking section, right? Because the overlaps are there, and it's something that we are needing to kind of be talking about and sometimes wrestling with, and sometimes not coming to a solid answer, right? Sometimes our answer is we are in the middle, right? But really thinking, and I think that Alexandra in the chat kind of named that, when we're thinking about all of these different things, right, we hold our own views, but we also know that there's many people out there who hold differing views. And while we can fully, I think, probably agree that there's certain things that we should stand up against, at the same point, for the most part, we're going to be within this work coming up against a lot of different people and a lot of different things that may be counter to our own beliefs sometimes. And how are we best able to kind of hold those truths, right? And how are we best able to also take care of ourselves within different spaces, acknowledging the fact that sometimes, your own either beliefs or your own life experiences may make you not the best, advocate for a certain individual, but then how are you still able to connect them with support later on, right? How are we also able to acknowledge the fact that, I may hold this certain belief, but the survivor that I'm going to be working with doesn't. And so how are we kind of able to kind of come to some peace with that? And so I think that, throughout this training, just kind of keeping that in mind, where are those biases and where are those things that are, value driven, and where are those things where we can be learning more about and exploring more, right? Because even on this call, we're hearing different things and recognizing oh, if I had heard this sort of view, it doesn't fully change it, but it provides me more information, right? And so from this, I hope we are all able to kind of just keep learning and growing and thinking about how do we bring ourselves into this work? Next slide. I think we're just about done with this one. Yes, and so we've talked about a lot of these already. But really like naming the fact that, you know, like all those different things that brought us here are the same sorts of things that survivors are bringing forward, right? Those different things that are our family of origin, our family of choice, our sexuality, our first interactions with sex, all these different things, our family, our support, our friends, our education, even like, you know, our age, right, will come into play, and none of that's wrong, but it is impacting how we step into space with each other, right? Every single time we're with people, we have to acknowledge that fact, that even like, and so like just name, you know, like I am very light skinned, and with that comes privilege, right? And so how within spaces are we able to be holding, you know, holding our different parts of our truth, different parts of identity, while being, you know, in community and working respectfully with people, right? And so we can't, you know, hide, you know, portions of, well, we don't have to always be fully upfront with portions of who we are. But just knowing that our biases are there sometimes, even if we don't want them to be, or just these different parts of who we are, not even biases in a negative way, but all of those things that make you, come into how you enter into the work environment, right? And so then thinking, as I said, you know, is there another advocate that can step in? Is it something that you can kind of continue to work with, but you might just need a little bit extra like supervision or consultation, or just someone to occasionally like check, like, is this right? Or, you know, can you provide me ideas or support within this ways? And just that ability to kind of adapt, right? And you're not always going to be perfect. Like we're not striving for perfection. We're striving for us to be able to truly just be in support and community with others, right? And so not to get embarrassed or beaten down when you or feel like, you know, yourself, when you have made those mistakes or when you have made like, you know, missteps, but to be able to acknowledge and to learn and to make changes is the best that we can do. And with all of this, despite all of our own personal views, personal things, how are you still able to try to do the work to always center, you know, survivors' experiences and needs more so than our own, you know, philosophies and our own histories, right? And so next slide. All right, that's what I thought. We are at the end of that first portion. That is just the readiness portion of our training. But I really think that a lot of really good kind of things have hopefully kind of started to bubble up that we'll dive deeper into with each coming section. I'll turn it over to Steph to give the announcements for the break.
Okay, thank you, Jolene, so much. And thank you guys all for all of that amazing feedback and discussion and participation. And yeah, I just literally like got chills and from just reading everything, and the vibe in here is amazing. So I appreciate that. We're going to take a 15-minute break to give everybody some time to try to metabolize some of that and regroup and come back. So if you guys can meet us back here in 15, we will be here. And so take some time. Thank you.
Beginning. If you go back to that chart we had in the beginning, you know, you don't have to be a perfectionist, right? A lot of us weren't taught our language, our culture, our practices, you know, and we weren't taught because people before us were beaten or weren't allowed to do that. So that shame sometimes holds us back, or it sometimes can get messy. But using a spiritual approach, and being patient. The one thing I want to say about advocacy too is that we're just the listeners. It's their story. It's not our story. It's their story. So whatever helps them is what we need to listen to. And so we, in this one too, in this modular too, we're gonna talk about the difference between the advocacy model and the case management model. And, you know, and it goes back to the quantity over quality, right? How many numbers do we have? Did we give them proper service? Or are we just looking for numbers so that we can say our program was successful? And what is success measured in? Like, how do you measure success? Or, I mean, really, it's the survivor and their story and their healing journey. Okay, so understanding roles and responsibilities of advocacies as it relates to social and system changes. And I know that in the last modular, we talked about that too, about how instead of, you know, looking for ways that we can continue to do advocacy, how can we stop the violence, right? How do we get it so that we are out of jobs and we don't have jobs because we have made system and social changes where it comes to sexual assault in our communities. Staff, Jolene, you have anything to add to that? Okay, next slide. Okay, so the historical foundations of advocacy. Okay, so it's not new to our culture to have circles of support, you know, in our tribal communities. And different communities, they have different structures. And I'm Mohawk. We had long houses. Everybody in the family would participate in a long house, you know, the grandmothers, the aunties, everybody had a say in how children were raised or what was done or practice the traditions and the culture and the language. So everybody's roles were valued. Everybody's roles were valued and sacred, you know. Oops. Steph, could you go back? Nope.
Sorry about that.
Okay. Okay, and a lot of tribes have the matrilineal society where women and aunties or the decision makers, they were the ones that took care of the conflicts in the community. They were the ones that showed how things were done. So there's always been that collective I guess agreement. I wasn't going to say that, but that support and that family ties that kept the community together and looked out for one another. You know, if I was having a hard time raising my kids or whatever, then an auntie or a grandmother would step in and make sure they were taught the right way. Okay, next slide. Okay. Steph, can you say her last name for me, please? Nope.
I can try. I can't keep the mouse straight or the slides. Yeah, as Sarah Winnemucca.
Winnemucca. Oh, somebody knows her?
Yeah,
about her?
I live in Washoe County and we have a place called Winnemucca.
I'm Washoe and my mom's Paiute, and so that's how I know her.
Oh, that's how you know. Okay, so she was in like the 1883, and she was like one of the first advocates that went out and talked about the violence in our communities. She was also shunned and people judged her and stuff because she was talking about subjects that people didn't want to hear. But really, what she was saying that a long time ago, when war parties would come into different tribal communities, they would take the women or rape the women. And so there's always been that violence. Or when the coloners came in and they you know, did the same thing. So she was starting to stand up for women's rights before the anti-violence movement even started, and that was in 1883. So I hope I did her justice. And if any one of yous want to share a little bit more about her, I would gladly appreciate it. Summer? No?
I don't know much more about her. I just know we have a place here in like northern Nevada. We in Winnemucca. So
Okay.
she's
Okay.
she's pretty popular over here in northern Nevada.
And it was because she was doing some stuff about social, you know, changing the systems and talking out about things that people didn't want to hear about. And that was in the 1883s.
Mhm.
So
That
our
girl.
right, our history goes way back, you know, for women, strong women standing up. And I'm not just saying women, we have a lot of good male advocates too. So I'm not just saying women, but we have a lot of strong women that stand up for our rights and keep this movement going. And so that's why I said I don't want to just say women. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, advocacy and personal sovereignty. Working with on behalf of victims and survivors help gain personal sovereignty and control over their minds, bodies, and their choices that they live. So advocacy is really about coming into somebody's life when some of their control over their bodies, their lives have been altered by somebody using violence against them. So as an advocate, we have to be patient and listen. I mean, that's the most important thing. We have to listen and listen to their story, not the story that we think they should have or what we would like them to have or but we need to let them make their choices and where they're able to go. Because there's a lot of times where somebody that is sexually assaulted, they may not want to talk to a police officer right away. They might not want to go to get a protection order or go to court, you know. And some of those systems, we have to be careful because the victim could be re-traumatized in those systems too. So we really need to look at where they're at and get them to where they want to go. It's not our journey, it's their journey. And we have to let them have control of their bodies, their choices, and their lives. It doesn't, you know, like, I know a lot of us, well, I was going to go back to the case management thing. Usually a case management model has like, when they're here, when they come in, this is what they do, boom, 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 boom. But when you do a more advocacy thing, it's where they're at. You start where they're at and you go on their steps so that they can go to their journey. It's not pushing, it's not forcing, it's not telling them what to do. It's letting them drive on their own journey. I just drew a blank, so I apologize for that, but I just think this is really important. And the one thing I think that's really important about this too is looking at all their ways to work with them as an advocate besides one-on-one talking. There's like Tai Chi, there's yoga, there's gym, you know, all that stuff so that they can get the power of their body back and so that they feel good in their own skin. So those are all important things, you know, ceremonies, smudging. We talked about the elements, what elements, you know, will help them, what medicines will help them. So I think that this is really important and it goes back to victim-centered advocacy. It's all about the survivor, of the sexual assault. Nothing? Okay. So principles of advocacy. So we always try to create, we create hope, right? Because in that comment in the chat from the last, sometimes we're the only ones standing with them. Sometimes there's family members don't believe them, you know, the police don't want to get involved, all these other issues. And sometimes the advocate is the only one that is standing there when they can't stand up by themselves. So that's important to create the hope around the honoring their native sovereignty, promoting a self-discipline, determination. So that's what I was talking about with yoga, Tai Chi, you know, all those different, I mean, it could be lots of different things. Working out, maybe chair yoga, whatever, just so that they start to breathe, learn how to breathe, learn how to take that time and be okay with themselves. And then to establish a relationship. So when you're establishing a relationship, it's really important not to be, I'm the advocate, you were just sexually assaulted. Let me do everything for you. Let me take care of all this for you, and we'll get you into a safe place. And this is what you need to do. It's about establishing that relationship that we're both two human beings, and that I'm going to stand by you when you can't stand up on your own right now. That support that doesn't have no limits, no judgments. It just has that support that I will be here next to you when you need me. Assisting in basic needs, of course, you know, when you're responding to someone who is sexually assaulted and they're in a hospital setting, it's always really important. And I learned this through trainings too. It's always important that you do not let them go home in a hospital gown. You give them dignity and make sure you have clothes and clean clothes so that they can go home and not go home in a hospital gown. And why would that be important? Identity. And the other thing is during okay, yep, privacy, dignity, oh, and giving them the respect back. Yes. They're more than what they just went through. Yes. And forensic. Yes. You know, during that exam, their body is evident. So not this that they just went through a traumatic sexual violence. Now their bodies are evidence. So it's really good to make sure they go home, yes, with hope and support. We need to treat everyone with the utmost respect and dignity regarding this, regardless of their circumstances. Yes. Yes. Do not turn away from the epidemic of violence. We can never and we also have to remember that the violent sexual assault violence is not just happening to women. It's happening to kids, it's happening to two-spirits, it's happening to men and boys. So we have to make sure that we have spaces that are available for all people, not just for women. Work with on behalf of victims, victims to gain personal sovereignty and control. Oh, we already did that slide.
Were you ready for the next slide? I'm sorry, I had somebody show.
Yeah, that's okay. I know it's the afternoon and we're all burning out and I'm trying not to like rush through this, but I'm trying to be respectful of everybody's time and make sure we end when we said we were going to end. But like, if there's any comments, like I said, please, I would appreciate the comments. Acknowledgement struggles for human rights begins with protecting Native women. And I would say it begins with protecting all women. I mean, all natives, not just women. You know, we have a lot more, our numbers are going up with more men and boys, LGBTQ2 spirit. And so we have to look at all our members, not just the women. Communities are changing, and the perceptions of, domestic violence and sexual assault have changed in a lot of Native communities. It's not a family issue anymore. People are actually believing the victims and trying to make changes. There's more awarenesses. There's more, April, we're having Sexual Assault Awareness Month. How many communities are going to be putting out all kinds of information about sexual assault? And so it's not a forbidden topic, and people are actually talking about it, and how can we change our communities into making them more healthy? Promoting social justice and social change. You see a lot more of that. You see tribal chiefs and elders looking to make more changes to protect the community members. Elders taught me to treat others how you want to be treated. So I am with somebody, and being an advocate, I can try to implement that for them. Yes. Yeah, okay. Just trying to make sure I got what was in the chats. And the one thing we have to do is we have to protect confidentiality and privacy. So yes, if somebody is in the hospital doing a SANE exam and they come home, they come out of the hospital in a hospital gown, people are going to know that something happened to them. So that's why it's always important to have, some programs call them victim packages. Some people call them care packages, but they have like shoes and sweatpants and sweatshirts and underwear and bras, and just so they have nice clean stuff to come home with. Developing policies, procedures, and practices that safeguard advocates and women. So what does that statement mean? Why would you need to develop policies, protocols, practices that safeguard advocates and women? Okay, to avoid burnout and create safety for clients, yes. And oh, it's going so fast, I can't read it that fast. Yep. Secondary trauma, yes, secondary trauma is really important because as an advocate, you're a secondary victim listening to the survivor talk about what has happened. You're carrying that. So how does an advocate protect themselves and take care of themselves? Is there a place for debriefing? Is there protocols of going to trauma-informed counseling? Like what guards are there to make sure that the advocates, and the advocates have to be protected from their abusers. Like, you don't take your own car to a scene. You take a tribal card or some card that's not identified as the program, because you don't want abusers coming after your advocates. or attacking your advocates. Yes, so that's a very important. Jolene or Steph, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I
Yeah.
think that I would just say that as far as policies, I would um say that the stronger policies you have put in place, um and kind of looking forward to try to protect the advocate, but yes, of course, protect the survivor too. So making sure that those policies are in place, and hopefully to kind of prevent things from, happening. I know we're going to get into it later too, but um there has been, I mean, I remember things back home happening where and it's really sad when you think about it. There was a grandma that tried to hit one of the advocates with a car, and that just shows the depth of this trauma cycle, and it shows um really a lot about our communities and the safety and the policies and procedures that we need to be putting in place um, for our advocates and our survivors. So thank you, Deb. I think you went over it pretty good.
And the other thing with confidentiality and privacy, most programs, I'm not saying all, but a lot of tribal programs have are within the IHS system or a hospital setting or some kind of setting. So they're under HIPAA. And so they always say, well, we're under HIPAA, so we have to follow confidentiality for HIPAA. But for an advocate has to follow VAWA, which is a victim-based confidentiality, which means you can't identify a birthday that might identify the client as being a victim of sexual assault. So knowing your policies and procedures will also have like boundaries and stuff for the advocates so they're able to protect themselves and the people they work with. And I'm sorry about my phone. It's my granddaughter. She keeps calling. So I just muted it. So I apologize for that. Okay. Oops. Okay. Okay. Beliefs that guide the work of advocacy. I would like to know what you guys think the beliefs that guide the work of advocacy is.
I know everything. You know everything. Yeah, I'm really good. We're really like one of my biggest pet peeves is not everybody knows how to respect that and dispose of it properly. Yeah. And I'm just like, nope, you girls are not gonna be that way. I mean, you know us, we go in the wet restrooms and we'll try to use that trash can and I'm like, oh yeah, nobody taught them. Yeah. I do think that the newer options of like the period.
Okay, I don't think that had to do with the question I just asked, but I do like the stuff in it, everybody deserves support, speaking up for those that can't, empathy. So oppression is in many forms. So oppression is the root of sexual assault. We have racism, sexism, classism, ageism, okay, heterosexualism, ableism, and I don't know what okay. So Jolene did talk about some of that in the last one. And then gender-based violence is sexism, status, female identified as targets for sexual violence at a higher rate. We already talked about that. And most of the time, men are the predators or abusers. So I have a question. can men be sexually assaulted by a woman? So is it harder for a man to report a sexual violence if the abuser was a female? So some said absolutely, and once, so why would it be harder for them to report it?
Misogyny.
Oh, yep, because they're in denial, right? Because who's going to believe them if they say that that's what happened to them? Pride, embarrassment. So when you're looking at advocacy, you got to look at the whole picture. And then it goes back to like what Jolene was talking about in the last one about biases and our biases. You know, so if I was sexually assaulted by a male and then I'm working as an advocate and a male comes in and says he's sexually assaulted, I might have a bias. So for me to know my biases, I might need to get another advocate before I hear anything. I might need to get another advocate to work with that that survivor, because I might not be objective or being able to be supportive. I think we are only seeing numbers go up is because people are allowing men to be believed and supported. I agree. I think we're seeing more and more numbers going up about men and boys because we are listening to them and we are believing them. Oh, and okay, I would say it's harder for them because there's not as many resources as there are for women. But I also feel since it's more common for women, men don't feel like people would believe them. And can you guys put in the chat how many programs that you guys are working with have services for males or boys? Oh, we have services for all. Good. Okay, we have one that says they don't. But there's a few, yep. Okay, thank you. Okay, Steph, next one. Okay, so victim-centered, survivor-centered means that you work outside of the systems for the victim. It's about the victim and how you get the victim through those services or those systems, and how do you get them through those systems without being re-traumatized. So how many people do court accompaniment or court or law enforcement accompaniment? Okay, Summer, you had your hand up.
I meant to just say we do.
Oh.
I'm
Well,
struggling today. Sorry.
well, it is the afternoon and we have like 30 minutes to go. So I'm trying to make it as as pleasurable as I can. Um, okay, so program policies direct the roles of advocates. Solely focus on the needs of the victim in a non-judgment way. Tribal values guide a victim women-centered approach. So it has always been women-centered approach, but I do see that it's changing. There are more men coming out and doing more training about men and boys and what men need for services and how do you work with men and boys. But the one thing I liked, I heard at a training, and he was asked, how do you work with male survivors? And he said to the advocate, how do you work with female survivors? Right? Should it be so different? Like, or, I mean, they were both sexually assaulted. So how would it be different? So that's the question I'm asking. If you guys are working with men, is it different than working with women? Your approaches. And how is it different? Okay, Becky.
I think in a lot of ways that were kind of described in the comments, in that there is that not wanting to be the victim, wanting to be the tough guy, especially when it's related to sexual, because we're not used to thinking of guys as sexual victims, and how could you let that happen? That's a little bit more strong, I think, when the victim is a man, even though it's very strong for women also. How could you let that happen? And I think it's kind of like saying, why would you need specific Native focused sexual assault help versus regular? Because those are different components in how they've been treated culturally, and how comfortable they are coming forward and knowing what the resources are. So yeah, I definitely feel like I would treat that differently if it was a man than a woman.
And if you go back to one of the slides, we talked about them, the women being the ones that ran the village and stuff, right? And the men were the warriors, right? They protected the community and the women. So for them to come and get services would be harder. So I do see where you're coming from, Becky, because they would have more fear of judgment. But the good thing is, with the way the movement is going, there are more men that are coming out and able to speak. So that is a positive sign, I think. Next. Okay, so here is the case management model, advocacy model, and case management. Language using the name of the person, victim, or survivor. Okay, because some people don't even like to use victim or survivor. So it depends on the wordage, right? Victim, survivor centered, no treatment plans. Why would you have no treatment plans as an advocate?
This is Jolene. I will chime in as we get back to this main slide. I think that, and so once again, as I said earlier, my background in training, in addition to advocacy, is in social work. And so often I get people talking about like, oh, so you do case management, right? And there's nothing wrong with doing case management. And there are times where that model is really, really useful and can provide a lot of support for folks, right? And so we're not meaning to denigrate or anything like that. But
No.
what we're saying is like when we're thinking about advocacy, particularly like in regards to the treatment plan, is that sometimes like you have to be able to pivot, right? And sometimes the ways that we are structured end up having us be very limited in what we are able to do. And so sometimes people will have these like step-by-step treatment plans that they're meant to do. And because of their own policies and structures, they're not able to deviate to really meet the changing needs of survivors. And so to me, that's kind of like really what that shift really is. It's not, and to be clear, I know even people on this call, because of the way that our programs are organized, use things like clients, right, as the terminology that we call people. But often, like just trying to figure out, like, hey, you know, I'm just going to call you by your name, or I'm going to call you by this, versus thinking about that there's an other, right? There's a term, there's a level of hierarchy sometimes, I think, in our head when we think about the term clients, right? And so really just thinking about, hey, how are we just best able to kind of like meet people's needs without trying to be like, oh, we need to put you in these little boxes, right? Which isn't saying that things such as safety plans can still be incredibly relevant, and doing, you know, good intakes to make sure that we're really able to, you know, meet the needs of survivors are important, right? And so those are just some of my thoughts.
And I guess where I was coming from, I agree. I think case management is important sometimes to debrief, like for an advocate to debrief with somebody so that they know that what you know, maybe they need to refer them somewhere, maybe there's more that they need to do instead of just you know, doing the advocate, like maybe they need mental health, maybe they need drug and alcohol, like all that kind of stuff. But the other thing is with advocacy, sometimes it's you're not having the case notes the way that you would have in like a substance abuse program, because there is a chance that your notes could be subpoenaed into court. So that's kind of where I was looking at with no treatment plans. Not that you don't have notes, just that you keep them vague so that if you were ever subpoenaed into court, then you would. Advocacy is also, we don't give diagnoses. It's not political, it's grassroots, and it's social system changes. And there's a lot of programs that do use client as a name or use a number for confidentiality. But when they're talking to the client, we'll use, you know, I've heard some programs use, call them cuz or relative. You know, it just depends on how your program works. You know, in case management, sometimes they want a diagnosis and advocates do not diagnose. That doesn't mean that somebody you're working with might not be referred to mental health and get a diagnosis so they can, if that's what they choose. So it's really important. Like I liked what somebody wrote in the chat, that we stand beside them, you know, so we're supporting, and grassroots movements are always down to earth, and it's more centered on the survivor. Steph? The Advocates is a biased supporter of the survivor that focuses on the expressed need, interest, and safety of the victim, survivor, and their children. And so that means a safe place, resource to gain control over their life. So that might mean every program calls it different, you know, emergency intervention, like I said, care packages. So, that means that, you know, if they can't get groceries, or they need a couple days off, they don't have money to do this, that means to help them to get back to being able to take care of themselves and their children. Providing leadership to assist them as they go through the justice system, law enforcement, social services, and medical system. Sometimes all those systems together are so overwhelming that they might only be able to report it to the police, and then it might stop for 6 months. And then maybe they might be able to do something else. Or they might go for a SANE exam and not report it to the police. So just allowing them to do what they're capable of doing for themselves and their families at the time of the assault. Safety, you know, trying to make the offender accountable, you know, keeping confidentiality, using protection orders, knowing your jurisdictions, you know, knowing if your community is a 280, or what your jurisdiction's nightmares could be, because I'm sure everybody has different jurisdictional nightmares. And why is that important as a safety, for safety of the survivor, to know your jurisdictional issues?
Hi, this is Jennifer.
Oh,
Sorry for the echo. Hang on, we're gonna try something else.
Okay.
Is that better?
A little bit.
Okay. Where's the microphone on? Okay. So jurisdictionally, you want to know what jurisdictions are affecting your victim and where they reside, because it can dictate what court you're going to go through. It can also dictate what law enforcement agency is going to respond, which can impact the safety for the family, for the victim, can impact your safety as an advocate going to assist. We are in a cross jurisdictional area, so we always have to look at whether we're going to file for protection orders through state court or tribal court, because it's going to vary. And each different court system, depending on what your tribal codes are going to dictate what the court can allow for precautions and safety measures for your client. And in some cases, state court is a better option. In some cases, it's a better option to go through tribal court. So it's needing to know what jurisdiction you have available for each particular client, and then letting your client choose what's going to fit best for their situation.
Yes. We have state court in 4 counties and a tribal court. So if you have 4 state courts and a tribal court, then you have to know where the incident occurred and which county you're in before you know which state court you can go to. That was Justin.
Correct. Yeah, so depending on where this happened, we would have to find out which county it would need to go to first. And then based on if they were within the tribal reservation or not, as long as one person lives within the tribe, we can go to tribal court. And again, like she had just stated, tribal court is usually the best route to go. But there are downsides to that as well. Some of them only have, you know, I believe earlier we were talking about this, me and the other advocates, like tribal court can only prosecute for up to 1 year for rape, to where state court can, you know, they have totally different guidelines for that. But as far as communication between us and the court systems, our tribal court is a lot easier to deal with than it is any of our state ones. If we need something from our tribal court, they usually can get that to us, to where the state court will not give us any of it.
So the other thing too, like with the different jurisdiction is how to keep the family safe. So I had this conversation with OVW funder where they were saying that relocating a sexual assault victim out of the community or into a somewhere place is more of a domestic violent situation than a sexual assault situation. Do you agree or disagree?
I would say for us, I would have to disagree, because we are able to relocate somebody. Within our program, we actually have relocation funds available. I mean, and if they need to come back here to continue court and nobody knows where they are, that's fine.
Yeah. Well,
It's all about where it originally occurred that matters.
Right. And the important thing is sometimes our communities are so small that to protect the survivor and their family, we might have to relocate them because the abuse offender's family might be a big family on the community or our next door neighbor, and we need to make sure that they're safe because they live right next door.
Correct. And like for here, one of our biggest employment areas are either the tribal council, or like, we call it the RBC, the Reservation Business Council, which has a plethora of job opportunities. And then the next biggest one is going to be our casino. Usually, most of the time, that's where one of them works, or if not both. So I know recently we actually just had somebody that was forced to resign from their job at the casino because of something that happened.
Yep. And I like what Candace said too. I think if we go out of our jurisdiction, we might not know what resources are in other areas.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, next slide, Steph. Roles of advocate. Honor the experience of each survivor. Trust survivors are capable of making their own decisions. Remember, like Jolene was talking about, just because they were sexually assaulted doesn't mean they're damaged. It still means they are capable of making decisions for themselves. Support survivors self-identifying. Depending on what your case is, clients using names. Ensure survivors is not forced to cooperate or follow rules that jeopardize their safety or fail to honor their personal sovereignty. So what would be an example of that if we were forcing them to cooperate or follow rules that might jeopardize their safety or fail to honor their personal sovereignty? What situation might that be? As an advocate, would we put a survivor in that position? It's trauma. Yep. So we would not be forcing them, because as we've been talking, the most important thing is to listen to them, let them guide what they need, right? That's the most important thing. Finding practitioners that focus on harm of the offender, not the actions, circumstances of survivors. Maintain focus on responsibilities of offenders and how systems respond. So that goes back again to knowing your jurisdiction and how do you make the offenders accountable for their actions and keep the victim and their family safe. I keep saying family because every victim has a family. You know, if I'm the mom and I was sexually assaulted, then my kids are affected, my husband's affected, my mom might be affected, my grandmother might be affected. So that's why I keep saying family. It's not just the one person that's affected. Yes, they were harmed, but the whole family is being affected by the sexual assault or sexual violence. And I just wanted to say there are grants that have funding that do help to work with the family, not just the survivor. Okay. Okay, ensuring mental health, chemical dependency, or other issues are they're not influenced by how you look at it. If they have mental health or the chemical dependency issues, that is not a reason why they were sexually assaulted. That's you don't use that as a reason not to be an advocate towards them. If you have no background on okay. If you have no background on chemical dependency or mental health, then you refer and you work with those agencies to make sure that the survivor is getting the services that they need. So I have a question. I have a question about the secondary victims and the CAP 60. Okay, I don't know what CAP 60, what you're asking me. Delilah, is that, I don't, can you unmute and so I can understand the question?
Okay, Deborah, this is Delina. Anyway, the reason I'm asking this is we just recently had a juvenile victim, and so this is really affecting the whole family. But when I was putting everything into our CAP 60, the information and everything, it doesn't state anything about secondary victims like mother, father, family.
Okay, I don't know what the CAP 60 is. Is that your data system?
Yes.
Okay. I do know that under TSAS grant, you can work with the secondary victims, which is family members.
I noticed when I was putting all that in that it didn't have any data spots for the secondary victim.
Okay, yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know about that data system.
Okay, I'll message the people that oversee it.
Okay, yeah, because under TSAS, you are allowed to work with secondary victims. With the you're allowed to work with the survivor and the Jada.
Hi, I was just gonna say that I have CAP 62. That's the program that our organization uses, and we're currently developing it with them. There is a way for you to add in secondary victims. You may have to contact whoever is in charge of setting up your program's database. But you just contact them and say that you want to include it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
That's very helpful. And like I said, under the TSAS grant, which is the OVW grant, you are allowed to work with secondary victims. Do not advocate for anything that would oops. Okay. We never forget the violent ends through social changes. Changing attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. Oops. Okay, Steph, can you go back? Okay. Oh, yeah, you jumped. So, okay, I'll just stay here. Okay.
We have
Uh,
about 2 minutes to go too, so.
Yeah, that's why I was gonna go to the next one, but there was just one point on here, but now you're at a different screen.
One you want to be on right here?
The one next, the next one.
Next one?
Yeah.
Okay.
And like I said, we're gonna end right on time, so I'm trying not to rush through stuff, but okay, no, the next one, Steph. Well, I'll just do it here. We never forget that that violence ends through social change, changing attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. So the more we change the behaviors that it's not acceptable for these behaviors in our community, the more we'll see the changes within generations to come. You know, like I said before, a long time ago, it used to be family issues and everybody would stay out of it. And now if something happens, you know, you see it, you say something and you do something right? We never forget the roles of the system, change work that focus on.
Get to reducing.
Oh, did somebody talking to me? No. We never forget the roles of the system, change work that focus on safety and offender accountability. So that is important, but that is not like we have to wait until the survivor is ready to get to that point. They might be ready right away, or it might be such a bad sexual assault that the cops are going to come in and charge, and the victim is not going to have to do all the initial he said, she said stuff, and the cops do their role and take care and protect the victim. We never dismiss the reality that conflicts teachable moments for all involved, including advocates. And I used to say this all the time, that everything was a teachable moment, you know, like sometimes we would have like a mother and 6 kids in the program, and everybody would assume that she knew how to cook or whatever. But sometimes when you're in that victim role, or that role where you can barely take care of yourself, you can't take care of your kids. So sometimes just being human enough to say to them, hey, I see you need some assistance. Can I help you? Let's cook a meal together. Those are teachable moments. Those are important moments to make them feel good. We had raised garden beds, and you would see the women and children, and sometimes the men out there planting and then cooking the vegetables that they made, you know, that they grew. Those are all teachable moments. That's food sovereignty. My mother actually started crying and said, you know, I don't ever have to worry about feeding my kids, just as long as I have a garden that I can get stuff for them to feed. So we ask, we listen, we believe, we respectfully act on what the survivor states they want and need. Clearly and persistently send the message: violence is unacceptable. Any type of sexual assault and battery is a crime. The victim of sexual and physical assault is never at fault. The fault lies solely with the predator of such violence. And yes, Steph will be sending out everything, PowerPoints and everything, so. Okay, so options and victims' rights. They have the right to medical, legal, and like I said in the same exam, their injuries, their body is a evidence collection, you know, emergency contraception, all that is important. And I know this is a loaded question, and I wanted to touch on it a little bit more. Like how many people or how many agencies, if somebody was sexually assaulted, have access to emergency contraception. So, And then legally, they can do a criminal report, obtain a protection order, and advocacy support and empowerment is always important. Would anybody like to have a comment? Because we're like 1 minute over. So I want to be respectful on that. Okay, if there's no questions or comments, I'm just gonna read the other side real quick. A victim has a right for an advocate from the time the victim discloses to any services provided. Has options explained in order to make informed decisions. Have their choices respected. It's all about letting them be human and treating them with respect and dignity. So I'm going to let everybody go. We'll see you on Thursday. I'm sorry if I kind of rushed through everything, but you will get the PowerPoint and you will get the recording of today's PowerPoints. So thank you. Nyawa.
Thank you. And we're going to stay on if anybody has any questions or wanted to debrief. Our staff will be here for you, and that's going to be after every training. We'll be on half hour early and half hour late, so later. And so on Thursday we are going to be going over let me pull up the agenda here. We are going to be meeting this Thursday, February 15th at 12:30 p.m. Central Time, but we will get the meeting going at 1. And we'll be going over sexual violence in Indian country and oppression analysis. And also the module 3, sex offenders, what advocates need to know to stay on for, and we'll also be staying on for optional debrief. I'll be sending that information to everybody. Thank you so much for your participation, and we will see you on Thursday.